Is the new Hyundai i20 worth it? That seems to be the million-dollar question that everyone is asking. There's no denying that it has become expensive. Variant for variant, engine to engine, it's about $1 lakh more than the competition, and that's before we even get to the Turbo DCT model, which is the ace in the i20 lineup, because it's a model, it's a engine and gearbox that nobody else is doing. But the i20 does have that to contend with, and a few other cars that could be here. Now, the Glanza is the closest thing to the Baleno, and the Baleno is the best seller. And the Baleno is also the car that has beaten the previous generation of the i20 in all our comparison tests. Have the tables changed 5 years down the line? Let's find out. Novelty aside, the new i20 cuts a fine sight on the road. The new i20 is sharp and aggressive looking, even in more sober colors, and has a hunker down stance that says speed, with appropriate wheel arch gaps to match a complete rarity in the segment. The gloss black front lip, side skirts and rear fore diffuser solidify that impression, though I can't say I don't miss the beautiful Alfa Brera-esque taillights on the previous Elite i20. What we have seen is that the Glanza Baleno ages quite gracefully. LED headlights are standard, with LED DRLs adding on in this top spec V trim. I've always found this body shape slightly amorphous as it is to be quite pleasing to look at, but ultimately the i20 just grabs attention while the Glanza tries its hardest not to offend. Dimensionally, the new i20 is substantially wider than anything else in the segment, with a 40mm increase in width over the old car, but it still manages to look more compact, probably down to its lowered overall height and cab forward stance. Both come with 16-inch wheels though, the standard top variant size in the segment, wearing tires that look completely adequate for the cars. Quite easily, the i20 impresses the most while sat inside the cabin, with your attention immediately being grabbed by the wide 10.25-inch central touchscreen and the striations on the dash that make it look wider. Turbo dual-tone variants get red detailing through the cabin and very nicely done artificial leather upholstery. Blue ambient lighting adds to the premium feel, otherwise taken away by the plastic door pads. Where the Glanza does do one better is in the door pads, which have a large panel of fabric and contrast color accents that immediately make them look and feel more premium. Elsewhere, it's a familiar cabin with a very familiar 8-inch touchscreen, and while it's otherwise plasticky, it feels large and spacious, and the plastics themselves are of reasonable quality. Front seats in the i20 also appear to be better bolstered, holding you in place better than the Glanzas and with better under-thigh support. Surprisingly, the massive 60mm advantage in wheelbase that the i20 has translates into only marginally more rear seat space than the Glanza, which was the benchmark for rear seat space alongside the Jazz. Strangely, there's no cup holders in the rear and the seat doesn't split fold, and the Glanza's boot is just marginally larger. Overall, the i20 does have an edge in the features department, with Bose 7-speaker audio, a tire pressure monitoring system, wireless charging, full digital instrumentation and metal pedals for the turbo variant. If you are shopping for a lower range variant than the top specs we have here, the Glanza offers a bit more even in lower specs, with standard rear wash wipe for example. In the i20, the range-topping Asta optional gets the sunroof, extra airbags and strangely the ISOFIX anchorage points. While the second from top Asta gets the push-button start, Blue Link connected tech, keyless entry, burglar alarm, ambient lighting, bigger infotainment and Bose audio over the next lower sports trim. Reasons to go for a top-end Glanza V variant over the G variant would be the UV glass, reverse camera, auto headlights and a driver's side sun visor with a vanity mirror, a feature that the i20 leaves out entirely. While the i20 is all new and hasn't been crash tested by safety agencies yet, the international version of the Suzuki Baleno has earned a 4-star rating in the Euro NCAP with the optional safety pack, which includes radar-based emergency braking support, though it's 3 stars without it. As is, the Glanza offers ISOFIX and height-adjustable front seat belts as standard, while the i20 needs you to step up to the Asta optional variant for it, though it does get a maximum of 6 airbags while the Glanza tops out at 2. While we are considering petrol automatics for this test, the i20 does come with 3 engine options and 5 gearbox options, whereas the Glanza and conversely the Baleno is available with just the 1 engine and your choice of 2 gearbox. While the Glanza's got a 1.2 litre and it's a 4-cylinder versus the 3-pot in the i20, overall refinement actually feels a tad low, and that's purely by virtue of the fact that the CVT has you sitting at about 3000 RPM just to make light work of city traffic. You want to keep up with traffic, it's there droning away at 3000 RPM. Getting going from standstill is when you'll realize that the Glanza has quite a reactive throttle, and for the most part, while the rubber band effect, the dreaded rubber band effect, doesn't play up, when you do try and keep up with traffic, you do see the revs sitting at about 3000 RPM and your speed is trying to catch up. During most of your city driving, it's likely not to be an issue. On the highway, you get similarly relaxed performance, but at anything over that, there's quite a bit of droning going on. The Glanza actually posted half a second quicker times in our 0 to 100 kmph testing, but that's purely down to the i20 gearbox's penchant for self-preservation. It doesn't like to launch hard, it launches at about 1700 RPM, whereas the CVT in the Glanza actually launches a lot higher and keeps you in that power band, even though it is droning on at about 6000 RPM the entire time. Thing is, when it comes to making a gap in traffic and you put your foot down, hear that, right? The Glanza builds speed quickly, but it doesn't feel the most refined while doing it. For anyone with even a little bit of petrol in their veins, the 1-litre turbo DCT is definitely the combination to pick. Heck, even if you're not a casual enthusiast, just the way this car builds pace so easily, so effortlessly, it does put you back into the seat as well. But the key thing to remember is not to be too aggressive with your throttle inputs, because when the revs rise above 4000 RPM, this engine doesn't sound its finest. When you keep it below 4000, you've got a nice meaty mid-range to play with, and yeah, it gets the job done alright. The 4th Gen i20's made huge strides in the ride and handling department. Granted, the steering does still feel a little over-assisted, but the weight is far better judged, and overall when you get in the car, you just get this feeling of it being so smooth. In fact, the i20 definitely feels like a slightly larger car than before, and that's a feat that the Baleno and Glanza used to do really well, and now the i20 does it better. On well-paved roads, the ride quality keeps things quite supple actually, and even over the rough stuff, there's quite a bit of pliancy that's built into the car, but it never lets it get out of control. So speed breakers taken at slightly higher speeds, you hear the thud, but the car doesn't really wash out, and that feels great. You even get a fair sense of traction from the steering wheel of the i20, which is rare for a Hyundai. And that's actually an area where the Glanza trails far behind in second place, with just not enough feel coming through the wheel. There's also a lot more body roll in the Glanza, where the i20 keeps things relatively taut, and you have to be really pushing the car before it starts to want to push into understeer.
Like we've seen with most Hyundais, the braking does leave you wanting in what is otherwise a nice car to drive quickly. Both cars' rear ends tend to go light under emergency braking, but the Glanza has a slightly better feel from the pedal. The bite point in the i20 is a little too far for my liking, but it's only a matter of getting used to it. At first glance, the high sticker price for the new i20 doesn't seem like it could possibly be worth it. But as you add things up, from the extra degree of refinement in the 7-speed DCT, or the extra punch in the engine, the more assured ride quality, the smoothness in the steering, the sunroof, the extra airbags, the features, it starts to make sense, with very little to detract from that overall experience, with perhaps the exception being the quality of some plastics. What you're left with is a car that's only marginally priced over what it offers, but from the feel of things, it certainly seems like you'd be happy with forking over the extra money.
it.